From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Greetings, my name is Mary Lou Reeker, and on behalf of the Library of Congress's Office of Scholarly Programs and the John W. Kluge Center, I welcome you to a lecture today by Dr. Hector Leyva-Carias entitled Marvelous Country, Precious and Horrible, Honduras Through Travel Literature Writing from the 19th Century. Dr. Leyva-Carias received his PhD in Hispanic philology with a specialization in Hispanic American literature, cum laude from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. He is now a professor of literature and chair of the Department of Literature and Linguistics at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Honduras. His work focuses on the history of Honduran literature and bridges the worlds of history and literature. Dr. Leyva-Carias has published widely on many aspects of literature, literary criticism, and cultural studies. His work includes studies of colonial texts from the 16th through the 18th century, collections of 19th century Honduran poetry, and work on the oral literature of the indigenous peoples of Honduras. He has written or edited, for example, Imaginary Underground, Literary and Cultural Studies in Honduras, published by Plural in 2009. Selected poetry manuscripts by Jose Antonio Dominguez in 2008. And the stories The Lights on the Roof of the Church from 1742 and The Added Flapper from 1747 by Antonio de Paz Salgado in the year 2006. A few months ago, Dr. Leyva-Carias came to the Library of Congress on a Fulbright Fellowship to focus his research on the history of Honduran travel literature, a special aspect of his broader study of Honduran literature. Today, you will learn more about his research, and I hope you will help me welcome him, Professor Hector Leyva-Carias. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, may I say one other thing? At the end, there will be questions, but you're asking a question constitutes your permission for it to be recorded and broadcast through the library's website.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. I have prepared my lecture as a PowerPoint presentation so you can follow it in the monitor. I hope you enjoy it and bear with me if I make any mistakes, since this is my first lecture in English. Acknowledgement. I would like to thank all the staff at the John Kluge Center who supported my research project and granted me access to the invaluable resources at the Library of Congress. Special thanks to Caroline Brown and Marilu Reker, who conduct the center so well, and also to my colleague researchers with whom I share long hours at the library. I also thank Elizabeth Gettins, from whom I received guidance and advice, and Alicia Robertson, who assisted me in everyday issues. I also wish to thank the Fulbright program for funding my project and everyone who helped make this scholarship a reality. Jake Silva from the Council for International Exchange of Scholars in Washington, D.C., and very especially Carla Castañeda from the U.S. Embassy in Honduras. Objectives. My work initiated with the purpose of identifying and gathering books written by travelers through Honduras, as well as theory about travel writing. During the 3 months of my research, I found most of the books, which is in itself of great interest since many of them are unknown in my country. I also gathered important classical and recent literature about my subject in order to develop some interpretation guidelines. I am still in the process of reading and analyzing all these materials, but I believe that when I conclude my work, it will be renewed public and academic interest on travel writing, therefore stimulating and increasing its reading with a more critical eye. Why study travel writing? We understand by travel writings those which gather the experience, observations, impressions of someone who lived or crossed through a foreign country. Even if some of these books generally contain scientific and technical information that could be useful to historians or other scientists, this information is often interspersed with opinions and very subjective reactions. It can be said that the information in travel books is contingent, referred to singular subjects and moments whose images were immediately consumed by time, resembling the ephemeral art or sand drawings. We could also say that travel writings are part of the expansionist intentions of the great metropolis as they integrated through their views all peripheral territories like military or merchant ships did, thus contributing to establish a colonial order in the world. If travel writing does not reflect reality faithfully, but instead adds nuances to it, if the visions the writer rendered were ephemeral and born from a foreigner, often bearing a colonial interest and a point of view, and if we also see these documents as a part of the history of the traveler's nation, what importance lies in recovering them from the perspective of the visited countries? It is difficult to answer a question posed in such a way since the answers are foreshadowed in advance. In fact, we can say that the importance of recovering this literature is the same as the one deserved by recovering any other document from an archive, to initiate a debate about the meaning and representations of the past, to infer what these books really tell us, decide how much we can believe, excuse me, what deserves to be remembered, and what should preferably stay forgotten. This analysis is linked to the post-colonial criticism of documents about peripheral countries and also to the intention of conciliating views and constructing a historic memory through understanding both foreign actors and local realities. Review of travel writing through Honduras. The first travel writings in English about Honduras had a distinctly imperial purpose associated to the interest of England to settle in the Honduran territory. A journey overland from the Gulf of Honduras to the Great South Sea, 1735, by John Cockburn, is the survival account of a pirate who crossed the country while in a spying mission. Memoir of the Mosquito Territory, 1808, by John Wright, is the report of an officer of the British Crown scouting for the possibilities of founding a colony in the wild coast of the country. Narrative of a Residence on the Mosquito Shore, 1847, by Thomas Young, is the account of the stay of an official of the British Land Company and his journey through the cities and ports of Spanish Honduras. By the 19th century, American travel books replaced British ones, reflecting a mixture of economic interest, scientific descriptions, and personal emotion. Incidents of Travel in Central America, Chiapas, and Yucatan, 1841, by John Lloyd Stephens, is the narrative of the discovery of the Mayan ruins of Copan, written in a romantic style, bearing the sensitivity and points of view characteristic of the period. George Ephraim Esquire, ambassador to Central America and head officer of the Interoceanic Railroad Project, wrote two very different books. A country's technical scientific report, notes on Central America, particularly the states of Honduras and San Salvador, 1855, and a lyrical novel based on his travels through the jungle, Wagner or The Adventures on the Mosquito Shore, 1855. Exploration and Adventures in Honduras, 1857, by William Wells, combined his investigation to establish mining exploitation with his perceptions about people, towns, and cities visited. Mary Lester, an Australian Catholic teacher, wrote A Lady's Ride Across Honduras, 1884. She narrated her journey through the country, making generous observations about Hondurans and expressing harsh criticism toward foreigners like herself. Cecil Charles, the now forgotten novelist who wrote in 1890, Honduras, the Land of the Great Death, the title translates the name of the country, combines his impeccable literary style with a more simple one to offer both the account of his journey and a guide for investors and employees of American companies. I could identify 41 books of travelers through Honduras, most of them written by American and British authors from the 19th and early 20th century. I found two books before 19th century, 21 books from the 19th century, 17 from the 20th century, one from the 21st century. And for a total of 41 books. Concerning the language, I found 20 books in American English, 8 in British English, 4 in Spanish, 3 German, 3 French, 3 in Italian, 1 in Polish, 1 in Russian. And I found 36 books out of 41 in the Library of Congress. Almost all of the books are in the library. With few exceptions, most of the books are available at the Library of Congress of the United States. The aesthetics of representations. To read travel literature certainly involves an aesthetic operation, since as antiquities, they are objects from other times that, even if they were not created with an artistic intention, are there for our contemplation. We acknowledge the artistry of their illustrations, style, stories, and reflections. Due to this aesthetical quality, travel books deal with deep dimension of the human condition, with particular representation of the writer's own identity and that of the others, as well as their distinctive ways to live in the world, to interpret it, and to feel it. Travel writings have the singularity of covering contact areas. These texts flee the comfort zone of the traveler in attempt to describe and understand the places of the others, their customs, their landscapes. In the process, the traveler defines himself and his country of origin as he becomes aware of other places and other peoples. Elusive reality. Nothing is more difficult, however, than to picture a foreign land in an unfamiliar language, to capture its uniqueness and render all the sparkles of difference forged within another cultural tradition. When travelers are sure to having accomplished the most accurate description, they often fall into commonplace and cliches. However, when the author hesitates and their impressions become ambiguous and they lack the right words, is probably when they are the closest to the reality they intend to describe. The picturesque. Jessica Dubois finds that travel writing participates on an aesthetic of picturesque, according to which the visited sites are pleasant and desirable, precisely because the subject makes them fit into places and situations familiar to him or her. Picturesque means that a landscape or a person looks like taken from a picture or that they have an artistic appearance. What is natural seems artificial. A greenery looks like a garden, and people resemble literal characters. I think will be picturesque in a travel book if it resembles a well-known one, but by then the character or the new landscape will have been transfigured or even disappeared as if they were absorbed into the language and cultural background of the travelers. The picturesque will then be a way of representation that adapts the observer to the cultural frames of the observer through pleasant and attractive images. And I will read a certain fragment from the books to illustrate these aesthetics. Dawn broke slowly out of the soft obscurity, for after the storm there was the infinite quietude of a moonless tropical night. A sweet and smiling picture, Tigre Island with its splendid verdure, its sunlight shores inviting to a new world. All the splendid freshness of the morning pours in and blinds you for the moment. You stand there, dazzled by the beauty of the heavens. You draw long, delicious breaths. Oh, this is weather that they might have in paradise. The houses are built even with the street, and the patios or inner courtyards are very large and usually contain beautiful gardens with orange and pomegranate trees. When a family gives a ball, the patio is lighted with Japanese lanterns and serve as a conservatory for lovers to stroll and whisper in. Precious country. One of the typical representations of Honduras in travel writing is the picturesque. The country has a benign climate, the landscapes are amazing, the natives have kind manners, and nature is splendid. Nevertheless, sometimes travelers make Honduras seem as the complete opposite: awful and impetuous climate, empty and saddening landscapes, criminal natives, and most merciless and mortal nature. Just like any other place the country surely offered, it still does, many angles on human and natural realities. The ultimate reality and its essential identity eludes us, yet it is still possible to conceive an alternative reading that would follow these routes of friction, contradiction, and misalignments between the traveler's cultural frames and the realities before him. The only time I really suffered from heat in Honduras, the only truly memorable time, was down by the river Ulua at midnight, sitting under a huge lemon tree. Just at that spot, by the house of the ferryman, to whom we shall come in an after chapter, the road curves so that there is no passage of air. There was not a breath astir that day. The sun was hot, suffocatingly hot. I sat motionless with perspiration oozing from every pore, and the hot hued lemons fell around me as if themselves overcome. Grotesque. Grotesque is the opposite of picturesque, the extremely ugly, graceless, repugnant, or brutal. According to Wolfgang Kaiser, in the realm of the grotesque, a familiar and apparently harmonious environment is altered by abysmal forces that shatter its coherence. It's the kingdom of spawns and monsters. The traveler confronted to uncomfortable situations that repel or attack him accentuates the contrast, distorts or exaggerates them. Thus, new realities observed are transfigured to enter the hallucinatory and nightmares. The grotesque express the overflow of cultural frames with images of disgust, rejection, or fear. Horrible country. Entering the woods, the umbrella struck against the branches of the trees and frightened the mule, and while I was endeavoring to close it, she fairly ran away with me. Having only a halter, I could not hold her, and knocking me against the branches, she ran through the woods, splashed into the river, missing the fording place, and never stopped till she was breast deep. The river was swollen angry, and the rain pouring down. Rapids were foaming a short distance below. The rain fell as if floodgates were opened from above, and while my mule was slipping and sliding through the mud, I lost my road. It was necessary to enter the woods on the right. I had come out by a footpath which I had not noticed particularly. There were cattle paths in every direction, and within the line of a mile I kept going in and out without hitting the right one. Several times I saw the print of Augustine's feet, but soon lost them in puddles of water, and they only confused me more. At length I came to a complete standstill. It was nearly dark. I did not know which way to turn, and as Mr. Henry Pelham did when in danger of drowning in one of the gutters of Paris, I stood still and hallowed. Mr. C was in his hammock, and I was half undressed when the door was suddenly burst open, and 25 or 30 men rushed in. The alcalde, alguacil, soldiers, Indians, and mestizos, rugged and ferocious-looking fellows, and armed with the staffs of office, swords, clubs, muskets, and machetes, and carrying blazing pine sticks. Their whole stock of wearing apparel was not worth a pair of old boots, and with their rags, their arms, their dark faces, reddened by the firelight, their appearance was ferocious, and doubtless if we had attempted to escape, they would have been glad of the excuse for murder. Sublime. Sometimes travelers' impressions are so extreme, either terrible or beautiful, that they seem otherworldly. This astonishment before the extraordinary raptures their feelings and imagination. Kant proposes that the sublime as the absolutely grand exceeding all measure of perception, associating it to the idea of infinite. The scenery and landscapes subjugate travelers, overwhelming their cultural frames, and come out in their writing as fantastic, almost religious images of reality. But architecture, sculpture, and painting, all the arts which embellish life, have flourished in this overgrown forest. Orators, warriors, and statesmen, beauty, ambition, and glory had lived and passed away, and no one knew that such things had been or could tell of their past existence. Books, the record of knowledge, are silent on this theme. The city was desolate. No remnant of this race hangs around the ruins, with traditions handed down from father to son and from generation to generation. It lies before us like a shattered bark in the midst of the ocean, her mast gone, her name effaced, her crew perished, and no one to tell whence she came or whom she belonged, how long on her voyage, or what caused her destruction. Of the moral effect of the monuments themselves, standing as they do in the depth of a tropical forest, silent and solemn, strange in design, excellent in sculpture, rich in ornament, different from the work of any other people, their uses and purposes, their whole history so entirely unknown, with hieroglyphics explaining all, but perfectly unintelligible. I shall not pretend to convey any idea. Often the imagination was pained in gazing at them. The trees which shrouded may have sprung from the blood of its slaughtered inhabitants. They may have perished howling with hunger or pestilence, like the cholera may have pilled its street with death and driven forever the feeble remnants from their homes, of which their calamities to other cities we have authentic accounts. One thing I believe, that its history is graven on its monument. No Champollion has yet brought to them the energies of this inquiring mind. Who shall read them? Chaos of rings. Who shall trace the void? O'er the dim fragment cast a lunar light, and say, here was or is, where all is double night. The sublime is the experience of absolutely beauty, a state of intense emotion and expansion of one's imaginations. It gives the subject the impression of participating of the world as a whole, and somehow in the essence of the universe. The country that in other occasions could seem miserably too human or terrene seems to prompt spiritual experiences through the images conveyed by the traveler's antechamber of the heaven. Marvelous. Night under the tropics falls like a curtain. The sun goes down with a glow intense but brief. There are no soft and lingering twilights adieu, and stars lighting up one by one. They come, a laughing group trooping over the skies, like bright-eyed children relieved from school. Reflected in the lagoon, they seem to chase each other in amorous play, printing sparkling kisses on each other's luminous lips. The low shores, lined with the heavy foliage of mangroves, looked like a frame of massive antique carving around the vast mirror of the lagoon, across whose surface streamed a silvery shaft of light from the evening star, palpitating like a young bride low in the horizon. Then there were whispered voices of the night, the drowsy winds talking themselves to sleep among the trees, and the little ripples of the lagoon pattering with liquid feet along the sandy shore, the distant monotonous beatings of the sea, and an occasional sullen plunge of some marine animal which served to open momentarily the eyelids, drooping in slumberous sympathy with the scene. These were the elements which entranced me during the long, delicious hours of my first evening alone with nature of the Mosquito Shore. Towards an alternative reading. Travel writers tend to organize their work in different rhetoric styles that allow them to communicate their experience while transforming their reference. Although gazing at the country, the experience of the subject will always be in the foreground. People and landscapes are out of focus or outside of the referential frames of discourse. Stripped from the effect of rhetorical frames, all there is left is a myriad of different and contradictory facets of a country that could never contain them all as a unity. Multiple pieces of a puzzle, each searching for their own sense within the radically heterogeneous ensemble. We couldn't say that the images offered by travel books are false, but neither could they be taken as truthful. We could not accept the interpretational frames of traveler as the ultimate truth, nor could we replace them entirely with others completely alien to the text. For Paul de Man, a reading is possible, yet not solving the aporia of language by traveling in and out of the text, taking into consideration external reference, and mental representation of the truth and falsehood intrinsic to all expressions. This particular reading will renounce to definitive explanation and will be satisfied by permitting the rise of new sense. A plausible reading that could be productive and generate another text. A reading such as the one we have initiated here today. Thank you. I will show you some pictures taken from the books before the question. I will just show the picture because I'm not a specialist in this kind of, but they are very nice and we want to share with you. This is Tegucigalpa, the capital of the country. Pictures of the weather. That could be nice, but that could be ugly also. This is a storm in the mountain. Honduras has a lot of mountains. This is one of the presidents of Honduras. This is other beaches we have. Nice beaches in the Caribe. The mangroves, it was cited before. I have more. The birds, beauty and ugly at the same time. The grotesque. This man is a king of mosquito kingdom. The beaches, the moonlight, the natives. Another grotesque person from the Mosquito Coast. A beautiful, it's not a princess, it's a kind of shaman of the Indians. The rivers. I have just 4 more. About Copan. The drawings are from Frederick Catherwood in the book of John Lloyd Stephen that we have read some fragment. This is the way they found the Copan rings. Mr. Frederick Catherwood, first he drew his drawing with pencil, but after in London he prepared a color version of his works. This is a fantastic view because you see, it's not like the original drawing that Frederick Catherwood did. He recreated the scene in this picture, and it could be seen in this that he put many artifacts that were dispersed in the place. He put it together. And that's it. Thank you. If you have any question, I can do my best to answer you.
41 books that you looked at, how many of those would have been available in Honduras, for example?
Well, very few.
For example,
For example, the John Lloyd Stephens books, we can read it in Honduras. Vincent William Wells, we have translation in Honduras. I think maybe 7 books we can read in Honduras. But in the library, even in the libraries in Honduras, we cannot read the books. We have a normal edition of John Lloyd Stephens and William Wells. We can read it. A couple of them, the people know in Honduras, but most of them no.
the other thing that surprised me was there were not more books in Spanish about Honduras. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, because the travelers were from the United States.
But there weren't Spanish travelers going to Honduras?
No, we don't have Spanish travel from Honduras to Honduras. It's a good question. But I think that the answer deals with that the travel book as a genre is coming from England. The travel book is a genre developed in the travel from England to Europe since the 16th century, 18th century. It was a kind of book that reflect the education of the person in the main Europe, and it gives the frame of the genre. And when the 19th century came, the travelers goes to the exotic places, and the main intention in the beginning was to learn, to create a text about their experiences. I think that's the reason that the travel book is a genre from the English language.
So you examine exclusively works written about Honduras as opposed to travel works that included Honduras with other localities that people may have visited.
I have only studied, I have only collect the books on Honduras. There are many books about Central America in which there are parts that could deal with Honduras, but there are so many.
Right. It's a vast-
Yes, I have the.
much larger.
Okay. My target is just Honduras.
Also, the labeling on the illustrations of some of the found sculptures as being idols, has subsequent research shown that they were not necessarily objects of worship? Or, is that a supposition that reflects the premonitions of the cavalry, that they were objects of worship?
Well, I don't know if I understand well your question, but you're asking me if these idols
They're labeled as idols
in the books of the 19th century, but
subsequently has it been found that they weren't necessarily?
no, they are not idols.
They could have been.
No, they are not idols. Yes, it's the way that Catherwood and John Lloyd Stephens interpret those artifacts. But actually, the archaeology is telling us that these personages were kings of the city, and the city keeps the images of this stela. Is the correct name of those idols. This stela represent the kingdoms of the city, and the hieroglyphs in the size of the stelas tell the story of each of these kings. Mm-hmm. That's the actual interpretation of those.
Did many or all of the authors comment on the mosquitoes at the end? Did the name of the mosquito
Excuse me, I don't hear you. I asked you.
I'm sorry. The question was, with the naming, the mosquito coast, did most of these authors have some sort of discussion on mosquitoes in the area? No.
If they have a discussion about the mosquito
Yeah.
in many of the books,
Yeah, I was just wondering, did the authors comment on the presence or maybe the nuisance of mosquitoes since the area was called the mosquito coast?
yes. Well, it's curious. There are two kinds of travelers. The traveler who crosses the country by the Spanish country, which is the main country in the center of the territory, and the travelers who prefers to travel by the mosquito coast. It was wild and it was populated by the mosquitoes and other indigenous people in that area. The attractive were different because the traveler who travels by the center of the country, maybe they are looking for the mining, they are looking for, they have economics interests and so. But the travelers who used to go to the mosquito coast, they were looking the pure indigenous cultures. They were obsessed with the civilization and they were looking for the pure indigenous culture. But what they found in the mosquito coast, the mosquitoes, it was a very syncretic people, which came from the mixtures of Black American, indigenous people, even English pirates. And so they used to dress as we see in the images, with clothes from Europe, and they were not so pure as they want. But there were indigenous, like the princess, the shaman I showed you, that conserves the original costumes and the way of dressing, and then all the mythologies and that the travelers prefers than the mosquito. So the travelers wrote about the peoples on the mosquito coast a lot, and they were fascinated with this possibility of a state of grace or something like that of the indigenous in that area.
Do you have a sense for how specific to Honduras some of the themes that you highlighted are? Because I was wondering as I was listening to you, how different would it be if you travel accounts about Guatemala or Peru or China, for that matter, in the sense that there seems to be a number of elements that you can find in any travel account, and some of them actually, they are very unspecific. They give, if you take out the name of the place, in many ways it could be anywhere, or not. I don't know, but
Yes.
get a sense for that.
Yeah, I think that. Well, I'm dealing with Honduras, but I'm trying to say that it will happen in any place. The kind of aesthetic we used to see the travel books are like a clear representation of the places, but it is not that way. Not for Honduras, not for any other place. So I'm researching on Honduras books, but I'm thinking in the travel books as a general. I think Honduras is out of the focus, and I'm saying here. But if you are going to Guatemala also, but in the betweenness of what we are thinking, there are interesting things to reflect, to think about that could be interesting, because I don't think that the Honduran travelers' books, the books about Honduras, will the same about Guatemala. Maybe there are differences, so many different, but the books maybe don't catch them. That's the thing. We will have general issues, cliches, which will be repeated in many places.
I've seen John Lloyd Stevens' writings on his trips to the Middle East. And there, clearly, his previously conceived images are packed into his descriptions of what he was seeing. And that's why I asked about the idols, because it reflected a certain bias, religious bias on his part. And he was looking for that context. So
Yes, John Lloyd Stephen first he went to Egypt and they have a very nice book on the pyramids and those stuff. And when he arrived to Copan, he compared the city of Copan with the cities in Egypt. Wow. I don't know to one.
All right, let me ask. I had two questions, actually. One is, given that anyone who comes to another culture carries the bias of their own culture, just like the speaker of a second language carries the intonations of their first usually. Is there ever a place in travel literature where that bias can be removed? Or is it always there? Is it possible for someone who left the country when they were 10 or 12 to come back and have that bias removed, not be the filter through which they see the other? Or is it always going to be there?
It's always going to be there, because it's the way that we interpret the world. Even if we write about our own country, we will have a bias, because the reality is never. That's the premise of the theoric premise or theoric frame of this research is that the language, the way of writing, always is altering what we see.
I was just going to take that further, because any statement that or writing that's autobiographical is going to have these same kinds of issues. And they're often misunderstood in the same way that you're saying the travel literature is misunderstood. And my guess about that is that when and you can test this, I don't know, this is just hypothesis, that when the eyewitness is looking at something that's not well known to the general audience, the object is given a status of authenticity that it probably wouldn't have if the object is something that would be familiar to the audience. But if it's the only little piece you have about something, you tend to give it greater authenticity. And so part of what I think it's true of any time, if it was a writer, the subject would be more or less coded or not coded. But there is a kind of set of premises of interchanges between the subject, the writing subject, and the object, and the audience that I think is certainly gets more complicated, it gets more visible when the object is strange to the writer and to the audience. But I think that kind of complicated transaction instead of, I don't want to say misunderstanding, because no lens is neutral, but the complex interchange among three parties is more visible when the object is strange to at least two parties of the transaction.
Yes, you're right. Maybe I haven't considered maybe I haven't considered the audience, but the audience is always pressing the writer, because the writer is writing to an audience, not for the country that he is. I don't know. Yes.
That's what you turn off all your cell phones.
I forgot. I'm sorry. I never have phone calls anyway. Yes, I think the audience is praising the writer, and it's very interesting that when the writer is annoyed, when the writer couldn't understand what he's watching, he doesn't have the words, and I tell him one of the images, and there are the very interesting parts of the books. When they don't have the words, they don't have to, if it is correct to say this to the audience, but when he permitted to write about even those things that he is hesitating, it's very interesting. And it's very interesting to us. I will give you an example. A traveler looks an Indian servant with naked feet. And he doesn't know how to interpret this, because it's not just a custom. It's also a sign of a political and social status of this person. And he doesn't know how to behave with this. And he permitted his writing to think about it. And it's very interesting for us because it deals with the political situation, it deals with culture and everything. When the traveler doesn't have the words, when he is asking himself what does it mean, and the traveler doesn't know if mention this thing could be good or not for the audience or even for the country. I think that there are triangle with the audience, as you are saying, and maybe when the things are not fitting well, is with the audience or with the country, is when we have interesting things. Mm-hmm.
Have you found any evidence of public policy of the other nation having been informed by these travel writers? Because, and then feeding back into Honduras?
Mm-hmm. Not public policy, but see private interest. The books on mining in Honduras, there are a lot of books of mining because it's a country of mining, even today. And the interest of the travelers were to explore and to report this. And the other main interest to go to Honduras were the canal. Before the Panama Canal were built, and the travelers goes to study if were possible to build the canal across Honduras. And there were interest, but most private interest than state interest. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask if you've come across anything, obviously looking at travel literature, but whether or not these books and these discourses might have impacted on autochthonous representations of Honduras in the 19th century. So I don't know if there were intellectuals, writers from Honduras at that time who were maybe might have come into contact potentially abroad with some of these texts and then maybe responded or disagreed, or if it maybe influenced them in their kind of understanding of what Honduras was as a nation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the authors, the Honduran authors, they will begin to write in the 20th century, the first decade of the 20th century, and they will react about some of the issues that these books left written. Yes, it will be but but something very interesting when or a discovery for me when I read more these books, these traveler books, was that there were this picturesque aesthetic that I mentioned. It was new for me because I expected more grotesque aesthetic that this picturesque. Also, the travelers tends to deal with the country very, very well. So the writers in Honduras doesn't have to react necessarily because the image was idyllical most of the time. But there were other parts, and I haven't mentioned it here, very hard, racist, very hard, that the Honduran writer will contest in the beginning of the next century. Yes, but I haven't studied very well because I'm just reading the 19th century, but the 20th century is interesting. The books of the 20th century has ecological interest in the country. They went there to do bird watching and to take pictures of the everything of the nature. Is not economic interest. They don't want to write a novel or something literary, but they are interested in the natural especially. And ethnographic accounts of the peoples, but more in a scientific way than the romantic traveler. Because the movie, the television and everything are fed with this kind of aesthetic that we read in the travel books. And it's interesting, in the 21st century now, the latest books are very interesting because there are people who are going to Honduras to, well, I have one or two books, but I'm remembering one. It's a student from the state. He went to Honduras to think about the world, the destiny of the world. It's an educational trip, but he is thinking about what will happen with the third world, with the poor people in the world. How is his life? And what he wants to do is to think on that. It's very, very interesting. Not to create a literary novel, but to develop even a philosophical reflection on it. It's very interesting, the book. And so, but there are so many. We have one or two books of those kind.
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Thank you to you.
Very much for your
Well,
presentation today.
thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.